broadcast the meeting. And okay, just a reminder, we are online. Excellent. Okay. So welcome to anyone who's joining us online, as well as anyone here in Zoom, all the way from Topeka, Kansas. I'm Rabbi Sam Stern, and we're doing a little update on what's going on in Israel and with current events, because the world is a very complicated place right now. There's a lot of news and a lot of sources and a lot of different things happening. And I was asked to do these a little more regularly. And so I want to make sure that we're offering this. Russ just asked me about the Druze, and that is indeed where we're going to begin. So the Druze are a religious minority. The Druze are their particular, they consider themselves the one true monotheistic faith. I had the pleasure of meeting many of their leadership in the Golan when I visited last January, and their version of what they do, you could say, broke away from Islam around the 10th century, the 10th or 11th century. So you could consider it that. They would not consider themselves a breakaway. Just want to make that very clear. So they live throughout the Golan, really, is their main ethnic area. So they live here, I can pull up a map. Is yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to share my screen very briefly to show you this. Okay, so if you can see my pointer, here it's got the Golan here, which again, this has as a divided thing, but the Druze live all in this area. They live here in southern Syria, and they live here in the again, while there's a lot of lines and stuff, there aren't lines in real life for the most part. There are some border fences and stuff. They live all throughout the Golan. They also live up here. You see where it says Kiryat Shmona. Majd al-Shams is right where my cursor is right now. They live all throughout this area. They also live somewhat down here, and they live in Lebanon a little bit too. So they live throughout this area that my cursor is circling. And so they live in many different countries, and part of their ethos, part of their maybe it's ethos is wrong because it's a religious doctrine as well, but that they should support the country that they live in. That's not foreign to us, as Jews have a very similar religious doctrine that we should follow that the law of the land of the place we live is the law, and that we owe fealty, loyalty to the countries that we live in. And that's so that's something that's very familiar to us as well. The Druze have that too. So you'll find that the Druze, while they very much are a peace-seeking people, they would like there to be peace. They will be combat soldiers in the IDF. They serve in Lebanon. They serve the Lebanese state in Lebanon. They serve Syria in Syria when they're not being attacked by sectarians. And so this is who the Druze are. Now recently, now let me pull up again this map just to give you. So you see here where it's Sueda. Oh, no, now it says, okay, to the left of my cursor, if I hover over it. The dot where it says Asueda, this
Yes.
is the area we're talking about right now, this place right here. And now, in recent days, what's been happening is that there have been some uh, sectarian uh, violence. There's been accusations that the new security forces of the Syrian regime are not, in fact, just whatever regular Western type forces, but are, in fact, still jihadist type forces, as they were at least perceived to be prior to al-Shara's ascension. Remember the guy named Julani, um, or now called al-Shara,
Yeah.
Ahmed al-Shara, who's the current interim president of Syria since he deposed Bashar al-Assad. Uh, he his forces and the Druze forces in the southern regions, where the Druze are a majority in the and the traditional and the Arab Syrians, the more traditional forces are not. Um, there's been some sectarian violence. It's hard to get to the bottom of this. Has been happening over the last day and a half. I don't want to attribute X to Z when it's really Y. Uh, so I just want to be careful about how I present it. Um, but the conflicts between the Bedouins and the Druze, two different groups in southern Syria, um, was either a conflict just between them, or it also involved it was either a conflict just between them, or it also involved the regime forces doing killing. We don't know. Again, that's why I'm not saying exactly what was happening. Israel did bomb some of the Syrian forces that were headed to intervene in Sueda. Uh, Israel did that. Now, to be fair, Israel often feels, and the north of Israel is a Likud stronghold, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's party, um, and there are close relations with the Druze there, who have called for the government to do more to protect their co-religionists, their brethren in Syria. The Druze of Israel have called on Netanyahu and the government to do more.
Okay.
And so the bombing of Syrian forces today might have been, it might have been to prevent sectarian violence. It might have been a political move on the eve of what may be an election, to show that they are supportive of the Druze, which is good politics in Israel, because the Druze are like the model minority in Israel. It's got to be remembered. The Druze are essentially what appears to be, at least to Israeli Jewish eyes, an Arab Muslim force that is loyal to the state of Israel, that
Mm.
accepts that Israel is a Jewish state. So everybody loves the Druze. The lefties love the Druze anyway. The right wingers love the Druze because they they're so loyal to the state. And it runs contrary to the established message that you have to give up land in order to get peaceful relations with Arab citizens. Instead, the Druze were the example of that they could be citizens and accept a state of Israel and Jewish authority.
Are they allowed to vote?
Oh yes, no, every citizen of Israel is allowed to vote, regardless of religion. I mean, the Druze of Syria are not allowed to vote in Israel, but that's because they're Syrian citizens, or they ought to be Syrian citizens if they live in Syria. The Druze of the Golan are Israeli citizens, and they are
Okay.
entitled, and they do vote in elections.
I didn't know if they were considered citizens.
Um, So there's no religious requirement for citizenship in Israel. If you're born in Israel, you're a citizen of Israel.
Can
Um,
you immigrate to Israel? Like if a
no,
Syrian,
sorry. Immigration to Israel is generally restricted to the grandchildren of Jews or converts to Judaism. Um, if someone's parent was a citizen and then they left, no, because if their parent was a citizen, they'd already be a citizen. Again, yeah, it's the question of could Syrian Druze move to Israel because they'd feel
Right.
no.
Okay.
Uh, there's no mechanism at the moment for them to do so. I don't believe that there's any interest from Syria in having that happen. Um, Quite frankly, I don't even know if there is interest from the Druze in Syria in actually relocating because, again, part of the Druze thing is being loyal to the country you live in. So I'm not sure how that would mesh with actively saying they want to leave to go live in Israel. I'm saying I don't know if they've I know that they would like closer, they would like to be able to see each other a lot easier, to have like, like how the US and Mexico or Canada can go across the border and come back. They'd like that, which obviously has never been possible with Syria. But that's a different political consideration. That's not about moving to a new country and becoming a citizen. That's just about being able to do community things across borders easier.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so those that is so Syria has announced there's a ceasefire there. We may see the end of the violence for the moment in southern Syria. Again, there is concern there, and there's reason why there are, like with most things Israel is engaged in at the moment, it's complicated because there are real reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. And there are pretty clear political reasons, some detrimental, for why they're doing what they're doing. Um, and so I can never fully say, or I can very rarely fully say, Israel did X and that was bad, or they're doing this and it's perfect. I can't really say either because uh, maybe this is just the kind of complexity that comes with a long war. Israel's never fought a war nearly of this length before, never. Israel currently holds territory in parts of Lebanon, Syria, and obviously remains in control of around 70% of the of Gaza. Um, so, so that does that. All of that continues. I mentioned election. First of all, does anyone have more questions on the Druze? I don't on the situation with Syria. I don't want to.
No, thank you. Yeah, but you're going to talk about also what's happening in the West Bank with that American who was killed.
I am happy to speak about that, sure. Let's speak about that now. So there was an American in the West Bank. This is another situation where, I am not, no one has ever accused me. I don't think also of myself as the world's greatest promoter and defender of Israeli settlements and neighborhoods in the West Bank. I do think the situation is often much more complicated than people give it credit for. Um, the situation with this, there has been so much violence. I want to say too much violence, but that feels trite because how can I possibly tell the correct level of violence? But there has been a lot of violence, which I think is unfortunate, in the West Bank, especially in the last 6 months. But and it's worth remembering that the West Bank is a very different place depending on where you are within the West Bank. Remember the system set up by Oslo. Here, I'll pull it up. Now, the Oslo, they literally gave me a map of they literally gave me a map of Sweden. It was a map of Oslo, and I'm like, I don't mean those Oslo maps. You know the Oslo maps I mean. Okay, here we go. So the West Bank for education's purposes. Dun dun dun. Okay, great. So here you see the West Bank. All the really light areas. Those were areas, that's called Area C, and it's the biggest block, and it also includes the entire Jordan Valley, which is really this whole side here, essentially, except for Jericho, where it's in black. Um, Area C was Israeli military and civil control. That's where settlements often were, and so it was made. It was so those were decided. That's where most of the settlements are. Now, Area C is not where this violence is happening for the most part. Um, Area C, for the most part, is people who live in Area C often live there because of economic reasons. Most of the settlements in Area C are here along the border with the Green Line, or they're here around Jerusalem. Um, Again, that's where most of the settlers live, and they live there for economic reasons. It is cheaper to live in the settlements than it is to live in Israel proper. And it comes with a tax benefit, like the tax benefit that comes for living. Basically, the less desirable an area of Israel that you choose to live in, or at least the least connected to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the more the more of a tax break you get. So if you live in the periphery, and especially if you live in the settlements, you get you pay less money. So these are people who live there. These are not ideological people. These are not people who are going to pick up a weapon to shoot at Palestinians. This is not them. Um, Area B, which is the darker gray, it's not the light gray, it's the dark gray. Area B is under Palestinian civil. First of all, let's do Area A first because it's easier to get through. Area A is the darkest bits. These are basically cities. These are under full Palestinian uh, civil and military security control. It's called. They are policed by Palestinian Authority. Uh, for lack of a better word, if you saw their stuff, you'd call them soldiers. I think they're technically called police, but like our police, they're very heavily militarized.
You're talking about A right
And
now, right?
what?
You're talking
A,
about
yes, A, the darkest areas. You see
okay.
Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarem, Ramallah, Jericho, Bethlehem, Hebron. Um, these are the big cities, and they are entirely run by the Palestinians. The exception to that, of course, is Hebron, where part of Hebron has been a Jewish city for many, many hundreds of years and remains to this day still a partially Jewish city, with those Jews protected by the IDF because half the city is Palestinian and it's in a Palestinian area. Now there's a lot of there has been trouble between them. Um, the area B now, this area is under Israeli military and Palestinian civil control, but in effect, it's hard for Palestinians to. This is an area that ideological settlement has increased in, by Israeli Jews. You see, for instance, Ma'ale Adumim is this settlement block here. That's in that area. Kiryat Arba, this is where Itamar Ben-Gvir, you might have heard of him. He's the national security minister and known super far right uh, Kahana support, a very, very far right guy. He comes from here, from Kiryat Arba. Why are these things on the edges, Ariel? Why are they on the edges, Ma'ale Ephraim? Why are they at Shiloh? Why are they on the edges of these blocks? It is intentionally to help break up these blocks. Um, if there are fewer contiguous Ma'ale Menashe, if there are fewer contiguous areas settled by Palestinians, um, then the idea is whenever a future settlement is made, less overall land will be apportioned to them. Um, these are ideological settlers. Now, as is very true in Israel. Now, I just gave you as far left a position as I'm probably capable of giving you, to be honest, and it could get more. These settlers do some bad stuff sometimes. They do burn down olive groves on land they believe to be theirs, but nonetheless. Um, Jews will often buy land from Arabs, but that is a when you buy land in the West Bank, it's a penalty of the Palestinian Authority of death to sell your land to Jews. So those purchases are rarely recognized by Palestinian courts because you wouldn't file your paperwork if they would kill you for doing it. So some other Palestinian moves in, says the Jews came and stole this land. Well, those Jews bought that land, but then it didn't get you. My point of saying this is it gets very complicated, and it is not only the settlers who do violence in the West Bank. Um, Palestinians do violence in the West Bank. They do it to other Palestinians. They do it to people they suspect to be collaborators, and they do it to settlers in the form of stabbing attacks and car ramming attacks, including one that just happened the other day, where someone was stabbed at the same shopping center that Ari Fuld was stabbed at. And I spoke about his murder and the High Holy Days, I think like 6 years ago. So this is a complicated situation. I don't, none of what I'm saying is meant to minimize the complexity of this particular situation. And you asked me to weigh in. I say all of this because you asked me to weigh in on the American young man who was present and killed. Media reports reported it very brutally. Those media reports may be believed or not. I take them with a grain of salt, because the media often is too quick to take a very biased report and claim that it's the unambiguous truth. And so reports I have seen have indicated that there were two groups, one Jewish and one Arab, fighting each other, and that this young man was wounded during that fighting, and that his death was only reported many hours later, after it would have been possible for him to have been beaten. So what is true, I am not sure. I agree with the ambassador of the United States to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who said that there should be an immediate and thorough investigation, so that we know the absolute facts of the situation. It cannot be that anyone can murder an American. Cannot be. But was he murdered? And what were the circumstances of this? And quite frankly, it is worth knowing. I'm sensitive to the fact he's an American, but I'm also sensitive to the fact, don't mean to get so political, but it's current events. What can I do? That Barack Obama droned an American citizen too when he was engaged in terrorism. So I'm sensitive to the fact that circumstances sometimes dictate our response to these things. So if this young man was murdered by settlers, as it has been portrayed, absolutely, the American government should demand accountability from Israel. If it turns out that this young man was engaged in terror against civilians and was responded to and died in that conflict, then I think I would love to see a more permanent solution that fixes some of the problems we have in the West Bank, so that there's less, so that the people who live there can live there in the areas that they live in, and that there won't be violence done by anyone against anyone, which shouldn't happen. So, there's a lot to it, and I'm happy to take questions and things. Absolutely. I just want to see how complicated it is. Yeah.
Wasn't he identified as a Palestinian American?
Yeah, yes, he's a Palestinian American. He was theoretically there visiting family. The question is whether he was also there doing other things like
Right.
engaging in prescribed terrorist activity, which would be different than just visiting your cousin. If I go to Tel Aviv, even that, I think back to the Stern Gang. Does everyone know the story of the Stern Gang? It's
No.
very, no? Okay. I'm not really related to them. So if you're about to be like, I can't, the rabbi's a terrorist, I can't. Just give me a minute. So there was a group called the Lehi. They were one of the big paramilitary groups in pre-state Israel, before it all got folded under the Haganah, which became the IDF. There was one of them was called the Lehi. It was run by a man named Avraham Stern, and they often called the paramilitary group the Stern Gang. The British kept trying to find and kill him, but they never quite could manage it. Anyway, why am I telling you the story of the Stern Gang? I forget, to be honest. But I really did want to tell you. I'll remember in a second, but
Something about you being in Israel.
oh yes, thank you. Okay, so if I went pre-state, and I was like, hey, I'm going to visit my cousin, Avraham Stern. He's not my cousin, but whatever. I'm going to go visit him. And I got killed by a Brit. I would expect the British government at that time, who was in charge, I'd expect them to answer for what happened. If I went there to join my cousin's terrorist group, and just do a fun attack against the British before I jetted back home to America, I would expect a different response.
Right.
Those are two different situations, is what I'm saying. And I agree again with the ambassador. I believe that there should be a thorough investigation so we know the exact circumstances. And I agree that the IDF needs to do much better at its responsiveness to these situations, which are becoming more frequent. But none of that can result in an immediate condemnation of either the settlers or the IDF. Do you have other questions about this young man? Okay. Let's move to the big political news out of Israel, keeping current events going for that. Bibi's coalition. Now, the current makeup of Netanyahu, the Likud coalition, is what they call the full right-wing government, the full-on right-wing government. And so the Likud is actually like the most left-wing part of this government, Bibi's party, because they have Smotrich's Religious Zionist Party, which is a settler party, and Itamar Ben-Gvir's Otzma Yehudit, which is Jewish Power, which is also a settler party, and UTJ, the United Torah Judaism Party, which is made up of two Ashkenazi Hasidic factions, or Ashkenazi, they're not both Hasidic, excuse me. Some Rebbe is going to come down and hit me over the knuckles. But the Ashkenazi Haredi factions, and the Shas party, which represents the Mizrahi Haredi factions. They have some real winners in this government. And because they've been so unpopular, basically from the time they won 48% of the vote in the last election, but because of Meretz not passing the threshold, they got just enough seats to form a government. These folks have done everything in their power not to fall as a government. No government, the term of an Israeli government is how long? Does anybody know?
2 years.
It's forgivable that you don't know.
When they
I think
decide.
Sarah's saying 5 years. Is that what she's saying? 6 years? Okay, it's 5 years. But if you don't know, that's okay, because no Israeli government has ever gone a full term.
Yeah.
Every single Israeli government has fallen before its 5-year term expired, and new elections were called at that point. This government is at this point just over a year away from doing it. And there's a very small, but there's a chance they might be the first ever to do it, because when you're that unpopular, you're not willing to go to elections. So letting out a little bit of bias, maybe, my apologies. I might be enjoying that fact a little much. The point being, what we saw this week was one of the deals, one of the reasons the Haredim both the UTJ party and the Shas party, have been such loyal allies of Netanyahu over the past decade and a half or more, is that he has constantly catered to their interests. He has shelved the Western Wall compromise plan that the reform movement signed on to, that would have finished and made nice the egalitarian plaza, and then allowed them to do whatever they wanted in the main plaza. Not good enough for the Haredim. Any recognition of reform is bad. They just froze the proposal. They just froze it even after it was agreed to with the court. But what can you do? They constantly are working on giving more stipends and things and rule exemptions and educational exemptions to the Haredi public, which represents some 15% of almost of the Israeli population. And the biggest one was, as contingent for joining this government, the Haredim wanted the Likud to pass what they called a conscription bill, what many Israelis called an evasion bill. Now, excuse me. Now, I'm not going to ask you what the difference between conscription and evasion is, since that seems fairly obvious. But what you must understand is that at 18, most Israeli teenagers are expected to be conscripted to the military. It may not be very American, but lots of countries have it, including Israel. Now, there are some people who get exemptions for various medical and other psychological, whatever reasons. And Arab Israelis are not expected to serve. No Arab Israeli is expected to serve. The exceptions to that, the ones who generally do serve are the Druze and the Circassians, which is a very small community. Those are groups that generally do serve, regardless they are not, even if they're not required to serve. Arab Christian and Arab Muslim citizens of Israel very rarely serve. Some elect to serve, and they generally have a much better time integrating with the rest of Israeli society. Most choose almost, but that's like 1%. That's a very small percentage. And of course, the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, do not serve. Now, some of them nowadays do serve. There are two regiments. There is the Netzach Yehuda Battalion, which is a Haredi battalion, and a new one that just started recently, and Netanyahu just met with them earlier today. I bet I can find the name of it if I look at my news app. Because he went there to pander to them. I mean, explain something to them. No, okay, it was on yesterday's news technically now because it's tomorrow in Israel. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, I forget the name, but it's another Haredi battalion. The Haredi concern is that one, they feel they may that now I want to present this from their perspective as well. They feel like they are being bait and switched. In the 1940s, in order to present the world with a united Jewish case within the Yishuv, or the land of Israel, the Jews who lived in Israel before it was technically called, before it was the state of Israel, Ben-Gurion wanted the very small, there were only like 1,000, there were very few, 5,000 Haredi Jews at the time, and they lived in Israel, and he wanted their buy-in to the state. And they said, we don't really believe in creating a state before the time of the Mashiach. And he said, what can we do so that you'll sign my paper? And I can go to the UN and say, I represent the Jews. And they said, okay, we want a couple things. We want Torah study protected, which means our guys are going to do Torah study, and they're, fighting not so much. And we want things like status issues, marriage, divorce, conversion. Gives us trouble to this day, but he agreed to that too. And kashrut. We want kashrut, there to be incentives for people to keep kosher in the state of Israel. Ben-Gurion gave them all of those things, and so they agreed. But Ben-Gurion did that believing that once they were integrated into, once they saw the wonderful socialist Jewish paradise he'd created, they wouldn't want to be Haredi anymore. They would want to be socialist Zionists like him. Sometimes the flaw of very smart people is they get what's Biggie called it getting high on your own supply, I think. In any event, uh, the Haredi did not disappear. They grew a lot and now make up 15% of the population of Israel. And we have a problem because the IDF needs more people. And they can only get, I mean, it would be great if every single secular Israeli was, and Reform Jew and conservative Jew was, and mainline Orthodox Jew was totally ripped and, Chris Evans, Captain America, like, full on. But that's not going to be the case. And when you have 12% of the population or around there is Arab, and almost all of them don't serve, and when you have an equivalent population that's also Haredi and doesn't serve, you're talking about getting up towards 30% of the population that won't serve, that is not going to serve. Now, the answer has been in secular society that the Haredim should get, as they put it, there's a Hebrew phrase which means get under the stretcher. Because the idea, right? We're all carrying the people who are, we all have to help each other along, right? So that the Haredim need to get under the stretcher. They need to help bear the burden of Israel's survival and Israel's security. That if everybody has to serve, then every Jew has to serve. Now, the Haredim come back and say, first of all, we made a deal, you deal breakers. Which they're like, we don't even like your state anyway, but it's here, and the deal is we do Torah study and you do your thing, and together we make it work for the most part. They say we would rather die than go to the army because we will not be assimilated. They believe the army is a tool of Ben Gurion to assimilate them, like the Borg or America, I guess. Where the idea being that they will go into the army and they will not leave the army Haredi. They'll go off the derech, off the path. They won't be good Jews anymore like they're supposed to be. They'll be like the rest of us Jews, who I guess suck. I don't know. They don't like us very much. Shockingly, this has led to a lot of resentment by everybody. And so the Haredi party said we want a new law. Now the law would draft some people, but it would also prevent the government from imposing a lot of the penalties that the government imposes on draft dodgers, which, and the IDF, since the court ruled 2 years ago that it is not constant, it is against the law that some Jews should go to the army, but the Haredim should not. The IDF has been they just sent out a couple weeks ago, 80,000 draft notices to Haredi 18-year-olds.
Wow.
Nobody showed up.
Wow.
It didn't get lost in the mail. The rabbis told them not to go.
Wow.
So this is where we are. The IDF sends draft notices. They don't go. Will they be draft dodgers? Will they be sanctioned? Will they be penalized? Will they go to jail? Will they lose their daycare subsidies so that they can go study in yeshiva and their kids can be taken care of by the state? Will they lose their yeshiva subsidy? What all of the different things that they get paid by the people who actually create the wealth of Israel to do. I think most secular Israelis would say that's fine. As long we'll find a way for you to go to the army and leave the army Haredi, but you've got to go. And especially while their kids are dying for the state and for the Jewish state, and these guys are not. And there's not a lot of ways around that. Now the Haredim I'm not sure it's their defense, but they say, they go right to the almost the anti-Zionist playbook sometimes, I gotta say. They go into the they do say sometimes, well, if it's really an equal state for everyone, why don't the Arabs, if we have to serve, why don't the Arabs have to serve? They say if it's really about numbers, then if we have to go serve, then we say that the Arabs should have to go serve too. And then, of course, they say, well, you don't want the Arabs to go serve. To me, as far as I can understand, the point is just to essentially to denigrate the state, but it's hard to tell. So because of all this, I've now given you all the background. This week, before the war with Iran, worth noting, before the war with Iran, the government was going to collapse. And Mike Huckabee and Netanyahu sat down with Aryeh Deri, who's the chair of Shas, the Sephardic Haredi party, and one of the longest serving politicians and multiple time felon in the state of Israel. Yep, everything I said is true, including the felony bit. But he's a rabbi. So sorry. Anyway, so he Huckabee and Netanyahu said that we're going to go to war with Iran. You can't bring down the government right now. And he agreed not to. And so they agreed to some kind of compromise on the draft law with Edelstein, who is a powerful Likudnik who runs the committee that the evasion or draft law has to go through. So this week, Edelstein sat down with the heads of UTJ, the Ashkenazi Haredi party, and they said that his new compromise was not what they agreed to, and that they would relieve the government. Shas indicated later this week they will follow suit. If they do, the government is officially a minority government, as right now they are at 60 seats. There are 120 seats in the Israeli Knesset. We're at 60-60 right now. If Shas and their 7 seats or whatever it is, maybe a couple more, goes away, then it is officially a minority government. At which point, a couple things could happen. It could be a minority government for the remainder of the like Bibi could just know he can't pass anything and just say, fine, I'm prime minister, even though I can't pass any laws or anything. At least for 6 months, because there's a rule that if you bring a motion of no confidence and you fail, you have to wait 6 months before the opposition can bring another. They did it before the war with Iran, and then because of the deal that saved the government, they voted it down. So they can't do it for another 5.5 months anyway. So he could just sit there for 5.5 months and wait. He could also, because he knows he can't do anything, he could call elections and say, well, I stood up to the Haredim and I fought Iran and I defeated Hezbollah and I did all this stuff and vote for me. He could give it a shot. Or he could do something much more drastic. He could try and form some alternative political coalition. These are really the options at this point. So, thoughts? I know I downloaded a lot.
What's your prediction of what will happen?
Oh man, I'm so bad at predictions. The problem is Bibi is a magician. And I've counted Bibi out before, and every time I've looked foolish. So what I'm going to do is say, I think what's most likely is that Bibi will choose if he can't find a way to keep Shas in, and Shas indeed leaves, I think he will call snap elections. I think he'll bring down the government himself. And he'll phrase it as him alone against, I don't know, but he'll have a campaign message if he does that. He'll be ready for it.
I'm not sure how does that benefit Bibi if he's head of this current government to bring down the government?
So Israeli polling there's a couple of things you should know about Israeli polling. The first thing, it's terrible. And because it's so bad, there's no good opinion polling really in Israel. They'll ask about who would you vote for? But that doesn't really tell you why enough of the time. Bibi's really good at figuring out why people are mad at him and what will get people to vote for him anyway. Uh, I think in this case, it could work in his favor if he brings down the government by saying, I was trying to really solve the Haredi draft issue for generations. I worked with my friend Yuli Edelstein, who did not give in to the Haredi party's demands for no sanctions and no penalties and no prison time. I think he actually did give in on no prison time, but irrelevant. He'll say that anyway because he doesn't care. And I think there are some people who left him. The people who left him because of October 7th will have left him forever. But we don't know how many those are. And the longer it's been since October 7th and the more victories, the less certain it feels that that will stop people from working with Bibi in the future. I think Bibi might see a world in which, after the next election, people like Avigdor Lieberman, who's a right winger, who uh just he doesn't like Bibi, he doesn't trust him. Bibi breaks deals all the time. That's why the Haredim are leaving now, because Bibi said, "Yeah, I'll do this evasion law," and then he didn't do it. Bibi just breaks deals all the time. So Lieberman is a natural ally. He used to work for Bibi. And he used to be his defense minister, his finance minister, but Bibi kept breaking deals to him. And Lieberman is a secularist. He's not with the Haredim. So Bibi chose the Haredim over Lieberman and they split. But in a new configuration, there's a world in which post October 7th, but also post destruction of Hezbollah, killing of Sinwar, all this fighting with Iran, I believe there is a world in which Gantz, now that Eisenkot and the left faction of his blue and white party have left, they're not National Unity anymore. They're blue and white again, and they're back to being a center-right party, not a centrist, center-left amalgamation party. So that I think Gantz and Lieberman might be willing to sit with, they wouldn't say so now, but I think they might be willing to sit with him after the elections. And if they were, he wouldn't need the Haredim anymore. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. It's just an idea, but this is what I think could happen. If he's going to find a way out, that's what'll happen. If not, of course, the big wild card is it's not so much of a wild card. It's like a looming. The card, I don't know. It's like the die has been cast. It just hasn't landed yet. Bennett, Naftali Bennett, who was prime minister for a year between Bibi and Bibi in 2021. Led a change government of ideological diversity Israel's never seen before. From the left-wing Meretz to Yisrael Beitenu, the Avigdor Lieberman's right-wing party, to the Ra'am Arab Party, the first ever Arab Islamist party to be a member of the government. Wow. This was a crazy government. And Bennett left politics when it fell. He's going to re-enter politics for the next election. And the question is, last time he got very few seats, but people actually thought he was a pretty decent prime minister. Now he's going to get a lot of seats, not as many as Bibi, but a lot. And it's going to make him once again in a position to be kingmaker. Quite frankly, I'd love to see him make Bibi have to sit as the defense minister while Bennett's the prime minister or something. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, the wild card will be Bennett. Will Bennett sit with Bibi? Last time when he formed the change government, he wasn't willing to sit with Bibi. He wasn't willing to be in government with him. And that meant it couldn't be Bibi. That's why they had multiple elections over and over and over again, because people on the right said, we won't work with this guy. That's why Bibi brought in the extremists, because they owe everything to him and he needs them and they need him. Right now, he may need them more than they need him. But we'll see.
Rabbi, I'm going to go in about 20 minutes or so.
Sure.
Would you go on to the Gaza?
Sure. Yeah, we could talk about Gaza. Absolutely. So Gaza is in an interesting place. The IDF currently controls 70% of the Gaza Strip. The IDF is only refraining from operating in the remaining areas because they believe it's where hostages are being held. And so the IDF has been very reluctant to operate in areas of Gaza where they believe Hamas is holding hostages. That being said, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a alternate aid organization to the UN being considered too corrupt, Israel did not want them to do the aid anymore. They, with the US, set up the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's actually run by a friend of mine, Reverend Johnny Moore. It's been very successful at feeding Gazans and has given a lot of food aid. At the same time, it hasn't been able to operate reliably in the north of the Gaza Strip. The north of the Gaza Strip is where most of the conflict is these days. Because, here, let me pull up one sec. Nope, that's Britannia. Okay, come on, just make it a big picture. Just give me one big picture of Gaza. Okay, that's not a great picture, but I'll take it. Okay, Gaza. Okay, it's actually a pretty good picture. Okay, so most of the areas still under the control of Hamas are areas like this, like Beit Lahia. Parts of this whole huge thing here is Gaza City. When you see this huge up here, all of this, it is all Gaza City up here. All of this green is Gaza City. Here's Deir al-Balah in the middle. There's a city. Here's Khan Yunis. That's a city. And here's Rafah. That's a city. Those are all the cities of the Gaza Strip. Now, the cities up here is really one big city, but they do have them labeled out as Gaza City, Jabalia, which is silly because when you say it that way, because there's another Jabalia, but Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun. The IDF is operating in a lot of these places still. Gaza, right now there is consideration of there's consideration towards a ceasefire deal potentially. The US is pushing very hard for a ceasefire deal. The Israelis and Hamas are both less interested, to be honest. Hamas has no interest in a ceasefire because they've already lost. So any ceasefire that's on the table will involve them handing over everything, which they're not willing to do. Shorter ceasefires might be possible, but shorter ceasefires are being held up by Israel. So the longer ceasefire is Hamas, the shorter ceasefire is Israel's fault, because it won't withdraw from all of the various. So there are various corridors that Israel has imposed through the middle of Gaza, on the borders of Gaza, between, the Philadelphia corridor famously, in Rafah, between Gaza and Egypt. These various corridors are areas that it is felt that Israel needs to maintain security so that if they have to go back to fighting, people always say, well, Israel can go back to fighting if it wants. It should be remembered that every time you go back to a street after a ceasefire, it's been rebooby trapped. So it's a very difficult situation for Israeli soldiers. That being said, Israel probably should do that, agree to that particular shorter ceasefire. It seems like it's not a bad deal for them, but again, it's not my, I'm not, they're not my kids fighting, so I'm not going to weigh in exactly. Yeah, so What questions do you have about Gaza? I've addressed food. I've addressed.
I'm a little surprised that the residents of Gaza haven't gotten upset with Hamas.
Well, they
That
have. It's interesting. So there are groups in Gaza, some supported by the U.S. and Israel, but there are groups in Gaza that are opposed to Hamas. But you must remember, Hamas held the total dictator. They were basically the Jong Il of that place for nearly 2 decades. It's amazing what you can do in that kind of time when you indoctrinate every single person who grows up there. Um, it's hard for them to break free of that. And there are more immediate concerns for many Gazans in the forms of making sure that they know where their food is coming from and such. Not that they can't get food, but if every day you have to go get more food and stuff, you're probably not planning a lot of revolutions against your Hamas overlords. So they are upset. They're upset with Israel. They're upset with Hamas. They're upset with basically everybody. Um, I agree with you. I'd love to see them do more, but that doesn't appear to be in the cards.
Ron,
Any questions about Gaza, what's going on there?
should we cover Iran now?
Sure. Um, so Iran, one sec. Iran, we don't have a lot of updates. Um, we do some important updates on the Iranian conflict are that recently, in fact, today, the Europeans and the Americans agreed that if Iran does not agree to a new nuclear deal by the end of, I think it's August, then the 2015 snapback sanctions, which European countries never implemented, even though the US did after Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in 2017, that the Europeans would also apply snapback sanctions and Iran would be fully sanctioned once again. Um, so that happened today. Recently, it's worth noting that Trump also indicated that the U.S. would support or perhaps just tolerate, but that the Israel might take more action if Iran seems to restart its capabilities. So there is a chance that, as for from the war, just an update of saying, again, it seems to have put back Iran's nuclear capabilities by up to 2 years. We'll see exactly. It's hard to tell. But something, it is something that both America and Israel will be keeping an eye on. That much I can assure you.
Hmm. I just wonder how much Trump understands of all this. And if he's not running the decisions, who is?
Here's something I'll say. I don't believe myself to be a Trump sycophant. I would say it does appear from what I've seen over the last month. I haven't agreed with every decision, obviously. It does appear that Donald Trump is making the decisions vis-a-vis military activity. I don't believe they're other people's decisions. And as far as Iran, I think he's surprisingly handled it rather well. So it's hard for me to, uh, you know, it, it avoided a larger war, which it could have turned into. Um, it set back Iran's nuclear capability. It put Israel back in the box. It showed Iran that the West means business. Showed China and Russia that the West means business, which is what it was really about. And
Okay.
we like it it was a move that seems to be, at least you don't have to, I'm not telling you you should agree with it if you don't want to, but it seemed to be a strategically at least considered move. So you know hopefully we don't see less, or we don't see reckless action in the future. But measured action, I think, is often appropriate.
It seemed like
Um,
Iran's response was quite muted to that. Is that correct?
Iran's response was, the problem is Iran's response wasn't muted. Muted makes, well, actually, muted is a good word, I guess, because it was muted by Israel, and America and occasional other allies. Iran has missiles, which are good missiles, but nobody has air defenses like Israel and America do. Iran uses Russian air defenses, which are basically rocks they throw at the air, essentially. Technologically, that's the equivalent. The S-300, the Russian air defense system that Iran uses was totally obsolete and useless. They shot down, they got 2 drones the whole war. Israel knocked down thousands of drones and hundreds of ballistic missiles. Iran couldn't even knock down cruise missiles. I mean, it's Iran lost the capability to fight very early in the war. Iran's air force could do nothing in the skies. Israel had basically not just air supremacy, but air domination from the beginning of the conflict. It was like the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. They just had nothing. If there had been ground force, there were ground forces, but only certain elite commando teams, not like battalions of ground forces. But had it been Iran was done. They had nothing. All they had was the remaining, and there's a great graph actually of Iranian fired. I'm just trying to get this because I think there's a site that did a I'm pulling it up so that I can show you all. Okay, so from our friends at Understanding War. So you see here, like there were a lot, and then at this point they kill most of the launchers, and they're really just every time they fire new missiles, Israel finds more launchers and blows them up. And so Iran started to run low on missile launchers in the last day of the conflict. They essentially only fired 1 missile. So their capability was seriously down. They also, if you're losing that badly, like you just got to get out of it, because the alternative is you're gonna fall, everything's gonna fall apart. So they were never interested in fighting a war because they would lose it. Iran would much rather fight asymmetrical wars of terrorism, proxies, and over the internet with bot armies. They do not want to fight kinetic wars because they're bad at it. They don't have the tech, they don't have the training, they don't have the expertise.
What do their technological war tactics look like?
Their technology is extremely outdated. They do not have electronic warfare planes. They certainly don't have advanced early warning and control aircraft. They don't have.
No, I meant the bot. You said online.
Oh,
What are their
yes.
tactics there?
Iran is one of a couple countries, including China, Russia, and Pakistan, that run extremely sophisticated internet social media bot networks, both using compromised actual accounts and accounts created in violation of social media companies' terms of service. Iran is one of the countries who seeks to lend their services to those who serve their purposes. Often their bot armies are in service of those who are funded, like the pay for it usually comes through countries like Qatar, which will spend the money. And these bot networks, there are great videos on it. These guys will sit in front of computers accessing hundreds or thousands of accounts. It incites against the West, against Israel, against Jews.
Primarily propaganda and like polar.
Primarily just trying to shift the Overton window.
Hmm.
Primarily trying to encourage people to believe there is support for something when in fact there is very little support. Astroturfing, as they call it. Generally, that's what it's there to lend support to opinions that otherwise would not feature a lot of support in the West, but are also meant to divide us. So that's very much more their style. So yeah. Are there other questions about Iran, about anything current eventsy? Sorry, I know I don't talk a lot about America and stuff, even though the IRS says I'm allowed to endorse candidates now. I really don't want to and stuff. So I don't talk. I don't talk a lot about American politics, but if you have a question, I'm happy to try.
Thank you, Rabbi, for the
Okay.
nice,
Thanks
nice,
so much.
nice
All
review.
right. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined us online and on YouTube. Appreciate it. And have a wonderful week. And hopefully, now that you've gotten an update, you can stay out of the news. All right. Have a good
Hey,
week,
Sarah.
everyone.
Bye.